other Western Christian belief systems, because a lot of that also has to do with the physicality that's associated with what are called the corporal works, the works of the body, literally the working of the body, the doing. That is a core kind of concept within Roman Catholicism, where it is in Protestantism, a lot of it is rooted out of this idea of, well, if one accepts the word of Jesus and accepts the message of the New Testament, then that alone can be enough to achieve grace and forgiveness and, heavenly reward. So it's interesting, as we will come back to talk about this, because we're going to talk about the Protestant Reformation. We're going to talk about a split in kind of religious culture in Western Europe, and we'll see the way that visual culture reacts to the different ways that one visualizes redemption and salvation and a path to heaven. So it's good that you mentioned this, because it's worth kind of emphasizing this idea of, the traditional visualization in Western Europe up to the Protestantism is visualizing literally the good work, the physical good deed of that person. It's also why when you see the depiction of saints, even in contemporary Roman Catholicism, a lot of times it's physical. That saint is doing something, or they're being shown martyred, right? They've been crucified or stabbed, or their head has been cut off. There's a physicality to Roman Catholicism and visual culture that is absent, traditionally absent from Protestantism, and doesn't show up at all in other areas like evangelical Christianity, too. So very, very good point, and worth kind of emphasizing, because we will revisit this in a couple of weeks. Any other comments or questions? And the Scrovini Chapel is great. It's probably one of my favorite examples of Renaissance art. And a lot of times it just doesn't get the same attention, because everybody thinks of, Michelangelo and Raphael and kind of those guys. They don't think of, or sometimes never even heard of Giotto. But yeah, it's such a great chapel.
Yeah, my home.
I just have a question. Where does astrology fit along the lines with Renaissance? That's always been a big question for me.
So astrology, and I am not an expert in this, but astrology comes out of the kind of began showing up around the 9th and 10th century, and it becomes very popular during the medieval age. And a lot of that has to do with the religious cults, 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 and not as in dark magic cults, but as in the traditional ancient meaning cultivate. That is, what are you a cult of? You are cultivating the memory of a holy man or holy person, typically a saint or a martyr. And these saints and martyrs, of course, they have feast days. And so one day per year, there's a feast day dedicated to, for example, St. Anthony. And so these feast days and these calendars were then overlapped with astrology and the astrological chart. It didn't have anything to do with reading your astrological prediction, or you're going to fall into all kinds of wealth come the end of the year. It was in understanding the passage of time, literally by looking into the sky, into the heavens, which is the world of the divine, and paying attention to what celestial bodies were visible in the sky in association with what feast day were you celebrating during that part of the liturgical year. And over time, the sort of visualization of these things kind of began intertwining and overlapping. Astrology, as we know it today, is a 20th century thing. By the 20th century, it becomes completely divorced from its sort of Christian religious association, and it's off into the idea of predicting the future and fortune telling and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Well, oh, sorry. Well, during the late, I believe it was the late 14th century in, oh goodness, where was it? I have a book. One second. Sorry. During the late 14th century, it was the Jewish community in, oh, I just had the word. I'm sorry. um, in where was it? I believe it was Prague. They were because of the that split between the Catholic and the Jewish community. There was a lot of want to explore that in hopes of astrology and hopes of basically adding creating less segregation between a lot of communities. And there was a lot of hope of doing that, which of course it took to like the late 18th, 19th century to even begin to like understand a lot of that. But it was a big part of like religious aspects, hoping to intertwine or just give people an equal level of understanding. Sorry if that's confusing, what I just said.
No, interesting. Thank you for sharing. But you make a very good point, though, too. If I can just tag on, astrology, broadly speaking, refers to different things in different time periods and among different cultures and different belief systems, too. So it is important to make that kind of that clarification that, you know, what one was doing in one time period in one geography is not the same as what another is doing in a different time period and in a different geographical location. So anyway, that's why context is so important. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, well, there's one thing I wanted to add to the conversation is that, like you said before, astrology sort of meant different things at different times to different people. And I think it's sort of a broader spectrum of things, because there's another popular concept during medieval Europe and even predating medieval Europe, which was the idea of wheel. I don't know if you've heard of this, but like the Wheel of Fortune.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of like the cyclical nature of like fate or luck or I guess destiny stuff. And I think astrology married well with that because of the cyclical nature of like constellations and like the rotation of the earth and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're correct, and there even during the medieval era, there were many who connected this kind of idea of the cyclical nature back to the Old Testament and the sort of cyclical stories that occur in the Old Testament to kind of, you know, give it some religious context. Yeah, other comments, questions?
Yes, I do have a comment, but mine has nothing to do with astrology or anything. I just wanted to just question, like, why is it that when we are studying the Renaissance and the medieval times and all that in art, we don't really see a lot of brown people or black people? You know, like you would have to like literally go and like really, really search for it, but it's not in your face as opposed to a lot of other things.
Yeah, it's a great comment, and it's one that, you know, art historians have been grappling with because it does kind of present a very one-dimensional history, and not making excuses for it, but, you know, the farther back in time we go, the more difficult it is because, well, we just have fewer records to show. You know, you think about the medieval world and even the Renaissance world, these magnificent, gigantic cathedrals Well, we don't even know who the architects are. We don't know who the builders are. We don't know who the stonemasons are. There's questions at whether or not enslaved or indentured people were used for some of these things. There was certainly a prohibition against Judaism in some areas of Western Europe, in other areas